Welcome to the Production Masters Podcast, the philosophies and techniques behind making music according to the masters of music production. All right, everybody, welcome back to another Production Masters podcast. And this morning, my very special guest is Mr. Maor Appelbaum. How do you do this morning, sir?
It's a great day. Good morning from Los Angeles. I'm excited to do this interview. I read the questions and I think they're really good. So it's a great start for the morning. And let's rock.
Awesome, man. Yeah, it's an early morning here, but I'm fresh and ready to go, so let's do it. So for anyone that doesn't know who you are yet, can you tell us just a little bit about who you are and what you do, what your job is? I mean, we can see you're a mastering engineer and you have an amazing setup and all that, but if you can give us just a little bit of background on what you do.
Well, my name is Maor Appelbaum. I'm a mastering engineer located in Los Angeles. I run a mastering studio called Maor Appelbaum Mastering, which caters bands from all over the world and all the different styles of music. I like to work with different types of gear, from analog to digital, hardware, software, combination, tube, solid state, whatever. You know, if it sounds right and it sounds good, then I work with it. I got to be here in LA for about close to 11 years. I'm here, and close to 11 years. And I'm really happy because it's a good place for me to work in.
When did you?
Yes.
Sorry, when did you get in your studio that you're in now? How long has it been that studio for? Because you did work with a couple of pretty big producers leading up to your own mastering business, didn't you?
Yeah, well, I came to America close to 11 years ago, and then I worked for producer Sylvia Massey.
Yeah.
And up in Weed, California, she had a studio there called Radio Star Studios.
Yep.
And I worked for them.
And what were you doing with her?
What'd you say?
What was your job? What were you mostly doing working with her?
Well, I came there to do mastering, but we were kind of a big staff that lived either there or in the surrounding areas. So I actually did other stuff as well. Mastering was what I wanted to do and did a lot. But I also helped there with some engineering when there was a need for another engineer, you know, for tracking or for mixing if somebody, you know, was needed in the other room to mix a certain song while the other room was busy doing the other songs. And sometimes kind of assisting work, you know, help the staff, and a bit of tech work, but not deep tech, but more just like, you know, get the stuff from different places and exchange parts if needed. And not really deep, but the easier things. Yeah. So basically I was kind of all around. Yep. You know, I did some recording for her. I did some mixing for her. I did some mastering, assisting, you know, part of the staff. Yep. I was the only one who does mastering, and I did some mastering there. But we were a whole staff, and it was a good experience. You learn a lot. You know, absorb all, you know, from how the bands work there, and
for sure
it was definitely a very interesting and inspiring and a good experience, you know, that helped me later on move forward. Also, I met a lot of people there, so there's people that I'm still friends with from back then, so some of the artists, and I worked with them later on too.
Right. Yep, that makes sense.
And then I moved to LA, and then I had a few different studios before I did this one. This was probably the best one I've had because I had the most options to work it in terms of redesigning it, changing, you know, things in time, tweaking it. So this is probably the best setup and studio that I have.
Awesome.
I've been in this one for about I would say probably more than 6 years. Yeah.
Yep.
So yeah, it's definitely the best one, and also I always keep on improving it and tweaking it. Whatever I find that can do better, I add that into the equation.
For sure. So now I'm actually wondering, if we rewind just back a little bit further than that, how did you land the job working with Sylvia? And how did you make all that happen?
Well, it dates back to when I lived in Israel.
Right.
I'm Israeli native, and
Right.
most of my life I lived there. And I was doing mastering there. And one of the bands that I knew for years went to record with Sylvia, a band called Seek Irony.
Yep.
And I knew them like when they just, really like started out. And so later on in their band career, they went to work with Sylvia. And when they came back, I mastered their songs. And then, I heard about the studio, and I reached out to Sylvia and I said, "Hey, I'm thinking of coming to America and trying to make the move. What do you think? Are you open to have me come there and work for you?" And she said yes.
Wow, that's amazing.
And I was 32 back then, and I said, let's go, let's do it. And I went there.
That's awesome. That's incredible. And did you have any training as a audio engineer from any schools or anything, or are you completely self-taught other than before the Sylvia phase?
No, I studied sound engineering. I've
Yep.
been in audio for quite a while, way before. And I've worked in studios in Israel, and I worked live sound and rehearsal rooms, and I was a broadcasting engineer for 8 years.
Wow.
And so I was doing audio way before I moved to America, and it was a combination of things that I did. I was DJing. I was a musician as well, so I recorded my own stuff and the bands I was part of. And I was doing live sound sometimes, a monitor engineer, not too much, but some of that. And I worked in rehearsal rooms and in studios. And then in broadcasting, I did that for a long time and consulted, and I even taught audio. So I was in audio for quite a long time. But when I was just before I turned 32, I decided to restart my career and make the big move. And then that's when I moved to America, and I went to work for Sylvia. And then after that, I came here. But I in terms of mastering, I never studied mastering, or I was never mentored by anybody. I had to do it myself and learn by myself. And
yes. So what is it about mastering that captured your desire to pursue it, like with such determination and passion and all that? What was it about mastering?
Well, when I worked in audio, I've seen different sides of it, and I always felt like that I feel best with the final touch, because I was a music journalist as well, and a DJ. And those elements are in the end. The DJ is the guy spinning the record or playing it on the radio or in the club, and music journalist is the guy who's reviewing the record. So I always had one foot on the product that is out, one foot in. And also I had my own label, so I knew some of the things that are required to release the record and how to push it, distribute, and that stuff. So it just gives you an outside perspective, when you're the person who deals with the outside of it, not the actual production, but what comes out. Then your involvement is different because you listen to it, you hear it, and you can apply that to how to work it inside. It's so I had the experience of distributing records and selling them and to get the right packaging with the companies and all that.
And so all that listening, you developed an ear for how you thought things should sound. Would that be right?
I think I can't say developed a ear for how it should sound, but more being open to the different aesthetics and how you can take one thing and to put it in another. Like you can take one type of music and sound and alter the sound to fit a certain territory. Even with what's given, you can make the alterations.
Yep.
I think it's more of being open, knowing the aesthetics, understanding either the market or the potential market, it's a different thing. There is what is the market right now and what is the potential market for a certain thing, and knowing that even if it's a niche market, it still has a crowd, and knowing how to cater that crowd. So
right.
It's a very generic thing, but when you take the whole picture of it and bring it into actual audio practice, then you can do a lot with that. You can actually take something that would sound outdated in a way, and you can turn it to vintage.
Yep.
Then it's not dated. Then it's like cool. So there's ways, if you know the delicate parts, how to move something from one, from what would be considered not the right market to the right market, and you can do that by changing tones.
Yep.
And also you got to always appreciate what is there for what it is. You've been given a classic record, classic rock record. You're not going to try to make it a modern record because it doesn't fit. You got to keep it as a classic. So
Sure.
Also you got to keep the legacy of what it is. And I've seen people do the opposite, and sometimes it just doesn't work right.
Definitely.
You got to know what boundaries are, and you can break some of them too.
Yeah.
So that's what gravitated me to mastering, being the outside person who can bring a fresh and objective feedback to something, and also bring a new perspective to it.
Yeah. So once you had the interest in mastering, did it take you a long time to practice it, to be developing those skills before you felt like you were getting good results, or do you feel like you got it fairly naturally and quickly, or was it a long learning curve for you to get to the point where you're like, I've got this now, I can do it and put myself out there, How was that for you?
I think in audio it's like in life. You keep learning and you keep working your skills.
Mm-hmm.
And unless you have one formula, I don't have one formula. The reason you see I have different gears because I have different tastes for different things, and not everything could work with the same thing unless I want to impose that sound. But I try to go with what the recording is and what the music dictates, and the same thing applies to how I approach. Every day is a learning and a skill day. Yesterday you work on something, you brought it to a certain place. The next day you're doing it differently, you bring it to a different place. And sometimes the clients are totally happy with what you gave them immediately, and sometimes they need to make some changes. And that's fine because you want to cater their vision of how it should sound. So,
yep.
So even when I've done records in the beginning, it's not like I said to myself, now I'm ready. Just you dive in, you do, you fix, you improve. It's whole experience that you go through, and you learn, relearn, change, reach, and then you reach out to something you haven't done before, and then you try it and maybe it doesn't work, and then you go again to it next time and maybe it does work. You don't, it's not something that you get to a point and now you say, okay, that's it.
Yeah.
I think you can feel that you can do certain things. It doesn't mean it will be on everything. And also your clients have their own tastes. You can do the best thing and they will not like it, or they would like something else.
So do you have to deal with that sometimes when you know that you've done a really good job of something and you've done something that's appropriate for the aesthetic of the music, but the client wants to take it in another direction, which your experience tells you it's not necessarily musically right for it? Is that difficult to deal with? I know you'd always want the client to be happy with their product, but I think you know what I'm asking.
Well, first of all, if they tell me in a detailed way, or in a way that I can understand what they want, I'll try it.
Yeah.
If it works, great. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But if I know it's not going to really work right, at least I'll try to understand a bit more from them to see, where it can work. Sometimes they'll want something and it doesn't work, but then you'll explain to them what you think is the problem, and maybe there's another possibility. And then you find what can work, kind of like what's in the middle.
Right.
Certain things just don't do good for the music, and you have to find a place where at least it works with them and it does sound right. But there are times where what they want is really bad, and if they want that, you just give them that.
Mm-hmm.
It's I guess every engineer that I know, at least, I think, can tell you that there's some records that they're super proud of, some that are proud of, some that are okay with, some that are cool with, and some of that they're not so super happy, but at least they did the best they can with what they got and what they were requested to do.
Yeah. I guess hopefully the ones that you're the least happy with are the few and far between, I hope. There would be not so many of those, I guess, or...
You never know what's going to be hitting and what will be successful. Sometimes a record that is not sounding the greatest that you've done can be good, and you get work from that too. And sometimes you'll be like, I could have done it better, but it did its job and it worked. So It's very hard to know. Also, you have to understand that a lot of times okay things can be successful. There's a lot of things out there that could have been way better, and they're not.
Mm-hmm.
But they became successful because they were good enough, and they had a fan base, and they got good marketing, good promotion, and they had good songs, or a combination of everything. So, you strive to do the best you can, and hopefully that will help the record become better. But a lot of things are not in your control. And and that's the funny thing about music. Sometimes bands that are really good don't get signed.
Yes.
And some bands that are not good, they get. And then you have bands that were good not get signed, and then they got signed later on. So there's always this story about the guy who didn't want to sign the Beatles.
Yeah. And obviously also with recording, like nothing's ever completely ideal. There's always something that's like had to have been done at the last minute, or there's budget constraints or something. There's always limitations in every project, isn't there? That's just part of even the best case scenario. Is still going to have something that was not ideally 100% ideal. So isn't that true?
Right. In terms of budgets, the more you're in this business, the more you understand that a lot of times there is a budget. They just don't want to put the money in.
Right. Yep.
Like, if someone's really eager to do a good job, they'll put the money from their pocket and They won't go to a club for 2 months, and they won't go to, they won't buy, I don't know, drinks or something, and they'll save the money and they put it. I mean, it's
Yep.
part of the sacrifice,
That's a
part
really
of
good
what
point.
I,
Yep.
part of what I have here is because I really wanted to do what I'm doing. So
Mm-hmm.
I preferred investing in that than investing in other things. My business is important to me. It's my passion,
For
and
sure.
also, I have 2 kids,
Yep.
and the money that comes in from the business pays to run the business and for my family. And I don't live fancy or something like that. So,
Well, yeah, look, you could run a whole podcast on that. The things that people frivolously blast tons of money on, the amount of actually cool stuff they could have bought if they, put it into, mastering gear or something, it's obscene. Yeah. So, on the subject of projects and albums and that type of thing, was there one in particular that a project that you got to master which sort of opened your career up further than it was before? That after that album, the phone just kept ringing. Was there such a time, or was your career, has it been like more like a steady arc, or was it one particular album?
it's never been a steady arc. It's always a roller coaster ride.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm happy that throughout my career I got to work with a lot of artists that I grew up listening to or knew of and a lot of respect to. Each artist that you work with that is known can open more doors. Some of them open way more doors than others. It's very hard to predict what will bring you more work. There's certain records that you've done that brought you a lot, and there's others that you expect and they didn't bring as much.
Yeah, wow. Okay.
It's hard to know. I got to work when I came to LA. Some of my first clients were Yngwie Malmsteen and Rob Halford, his own band Halford, and I did also remasters for Fight. Then in time, I worked with Sepultura and Angra, and the Necromantics, and Dokken, Yes, and Walter Trout, Eric Gales, Armored Saint, Starset, Faith No More,
Yeah.
William Shatner, Fate's Warning. It's all in time, throughout the years, and each artist opens up something for you. Band like Yes, I've done four projects with them. One was a studio album, and then 3 double live CDs.
Yep.
So those brought me a lot of prog work. They're a big band in Prague. I've done blues stuff, like Eric Gales or Walter Trout. That brought things in. Of course, Sepultura and Halford and Cynic. Those bands brought a lot of metal. Goldhorn, Mayhem.
I'm guessing they would have brought in more unsigned bands that are fans of those bands as well. Would that be right? Because they've like, well, we loved it the way you did this sort of thing.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
An example like Faith No More brought a lot of work in because what I did was the comeback album. After 18 years, they released a new album.
Yeah.
And so they had a lot of fans and people waiting for that to come out. And it brought me a lot of good work as well. And then I remastered the first album, We Care a Lot.
Yep.
And that got a lot of press as well. So those things, help. And there's a lot of legacy bands I worked with that are like Meatloaf, or that's in the rock. But
so is that remastering you're talking about there?
No, Meatloaf. I did a full new album.
Oh right, okay, yeah.
Which was doing good on the British charts.
Cool.
And then I've done a lot of remasters, like for bands like Therion and Today's the Day and Pigface, and remastered some other old stuff. So, in time, you basically build up certain niches and clientele, and that opens up another line of other people that want to work with you. And and also there's singles that you do. I've done like Lupe Fiasco, Pick Up the Phone was a single that I did. There was other singles that are more pop oriented or rock oriented. So they all bring. There's not one that brings, and sometimes it's a really cool surprise. You work on a project that you don't even know that people know, and then you get called, hey, we like that record that you've done. It's like, wow, you guys heard it? I didn't know that it went that far,
Yeah, I guess there's an audience for nearly everything somewhere. I mean, there's going to be,
as long as you have stuff out there and people can reach it, and if they can read credits there, if it's a physical copy, there's more chances there's a credit. Sometimes those are also forgotten or miswritten or whatever. But in online, a lot of them don't have, but some do. And if that, people reach that and they like it, you get a call. Did a band called the Common Kings, that's the name. Okay. They're like reggae pop, and they're very well known. They sound great. And so, I really enjoyed working on that. And the guy who mixed it, Bob Horn, is a great mixer.
Yep.
And so it was a fun project because I got great mixes to work with, and they're a good band. So, it's fun. And we did 2 records, and
awesome.
2 albums actually. Yeah.
Yep. So with the remaster of We Care a Lot, was that difficult to do, or was it like, did you feel like you enhanced or changed much, or what was it like doing that?
Well, that album was the first one. The song We Care a Lot appears on that album and the one after, called Introduce Yourself, which there it was already a major label release, so it was re-recorded. But in the first album, they were limited in what they could do back then, budget-wise and equipment-wise, and it was their beginning.
Because it was like late 80s, I think, was it?
It was mid-80s, actually.
Mid-80s. Oh, you're right. Yeah.
And they found the original tapes. So they digitized them, and they sent me the actual mixes. And, the vibe I went for was try to replicate what's there in terms of not ruining it, but what I can bring in that wasn't enhanced then, like low end, and the beef of it, the body. A lot of times when you remaster stuff that is from the original tapes back then, there were different standards in terms of what people were listening to, if it was more scooped or not scooped, or, there were tastes. And also you were limited to certain pieces of gear, and if you would master it in a certain studio, that's what they had,
Yeah.
Now we have abilities to capture way better, better equipment. Even the smaller studios today have better equipment than the studios then, So it was something for me as a challenge to give the respect to the songs how they are, but bring in what was missing then, which a lot of it has to do more with the beef, the body of the music, and the low end.
Yeah.
And it came out good. It translates really well. I got a lot of people getting in touch with me and telling me they really liked it. And with the We Care a Lot, it's called the Deluxe Band Edition. So it's not Just We Care a Lot. It has the name Deluxe Band Edition there, and that means it has bonus tracks too. And some of those tracks were remixed
Right.
from the range.
Like studio tracks, were they?
Yeah, they were remixed again by Matt Wallace, and there's also some live tracks, and there's some demo tracks that were remixed. So it was a whole package of a bunch of stuff, and I think it came out really, really good.
Cool.
And it's surprisingly good. Like the music there is actually really good.
Awesome. Yeah, I haven't heard it, but I really look forward to hearing it. Actually, like, and I haven't bought a copy of the new Faith No More album, but I'm pretty keen to check them out now, particularly the remaster. Yeah, of We Care a Lot. I'm looking forward to checking it out.
Well, the new one is called Sol Invictus.
Yep,
it's already 2 years old, but
yeah.
But,
all my friends are mad Faith No More fans, and I've heard it plenty of times, but I've never, like, it's been, playing in the background sort of thing. I haven't actually listened to it on a good system and checked it out, or even in the car, which obviously we all are familiar with what's going on with the car, even if it's not ideal. So, but yeah. Anyway,
it's a good record. It's very theme-wise record.
Sol Invictus.
Yeah, Sol Invictus. It's very different than any Faith No More album.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
But it's very dark. It's very like a movie feel. Every song is very different, but they all work together like it's a movie, and there's different scenes in it. And it was very interesting to work on.
I was going to say that would make it interesting to do the mastering for, wouldn't it?
Yes. Besides the fact that it's a legacy band and they're great, it was also very interesting and challenging because you want to keep all these songs that sound different to make them feel cohesive.
Who mixed that album?
Matt Wallace and Billy Good. Billy Good, he was the producer,
right?
And he and Matt Wallace mixed it together.
Yeah. Cool. Now, I remember hearing in an interview that you were saying sometimes that you take something that people might think is like a flaw or something in a recording, and you somehow use that to turn it into the character of the master. I'm not really explaining that well, but I think you know what I'm talking about. That's one of your mastering tricks that you do. So can you explain what that's all about?
Well, sometimes what happens is you're cleaning up or changing or fixing a problem, and that creates a different problem. And it's better to keep the problem and work with it. But this is in some cases, not every case. And then at least it feels together. It feels with the music. Some problems are musical problems. They're actually not too bad if you keep them in the context. And if you clean them up, then you're creating other problems that come up. And
are you mostly talking about sort of stray frequencies or build-ups of frequencies in an area? Is it frequency stuff more than anything?
Well, it could be a combination of frequencies. It could be certain dynamics that happen. This is not a rule of thumb to work with, but I was yesterday visiting a producer, and we were talking about the work we do together, and I told him, I don't have really tricks. I don't have really special tricks. I listen to the music. First of all, I'll play the music. Every second of music is a timestamp of an activity, and you listen through it and you feel it. Now, there's things that are in the music that need to come out. Yeah. And when you start fixing problems too much, it could maybe make it sound cleaner, but it can sterilize it too much. Or it could make it feel too produced now, but it's not too produced, it's just too clean. Or it can make it feel too hi-fi when you want to go lo-fi. Or you know what I mean?
Yep.
it's not just about the cleanup. It's not just about fixing those frequencies, because sometimes those frequency problems are the character of it. Now, that being said, it doesn't mean you got to distort your recordings. I mean, that it could work. Sometimes it sounds right, but what it just means is that if I hear problems I can't fix and there are still problems, I'll call the engineer and say, hey, did you notice this or that? And if you can, tweak it so I can fix it. But sometimes I'll just say, no, I can fix it, or why don't we leave it that way and focus on other things surrounding it? And that's kind of, I've had mixes come in with hiss, and, cleaning that hiss did more, not damage, but clogging to it. Like you'll clean it up and it sounds nice, but I actually like that hiss. It kind of felt right with it, so I didn't clean that up. And in a way, it actually sounded better that way. It sounded like there's an opening. I don't focus on forensic audio. I'm not the guy who cleans up stuff and cleans, because it's better to do that while you're mixing. If you have issues, clean them up there, because then you don't need to chop or apply things to it that will change the sound. I think it's better to do that either after recording, like cleaning up the pops and all that, and if you can't in the recording, then at least in the mix prep or in the mixing. It can be done in mastering. I think that a lot of times when you start focusing on the forensics, you start losing the musicality. And
and
a lot of times you get a vibe, and when you start digging to fix something, it's kind of lose it in a way.
Yep, and I think it's
I can speak for myself.
For sure, but I mean, I've heard plenty of mastering where someone obviously has like a process where they just go through the process of cleaning things and making sure they're bright enough, to their idea and that sort of thing, and it has worked against the music, definitely. I mean, we've all heard, or whether it's final mixes where someone's thought that's what they needed to do. You hear when something's working against the actual music. So is there something that you hear coming in reasonably commonly, either from the maybe not from the higher end mixes, but is there something you consistently hear with mixes that is working against the musicality that everyone's doing, and you're like, oh, can you just send it back without this? Or is there something like that you hear all the time?
Yeah, there's quite a few things. I don't want to start naming things because it's going to kind of become a debate that there's no point in the debate. But what I can say is this.
Yep.
A lot of times people are obsessed with their overall tone of the mix. And because they're so obsessed with that, what happens is the music just loses its life. There's a point where the tone works against the music. So it just because it has a curve that the ear likes, you have to listen beyond that ear candy curve. Listen to how the instruments and the vocals come out. There's times where I get mixes that it just sounds too processed or over processed in the way that the music just doesn't pop out.
Yeah.
And the first thing I do, like, I'll try to work it out as is because that's what they sent me. But if I find I'm fighting it and it's impossible to really get the music moving, I'll call the engineer. Sometimes I'll ask him, do you by any chance have this, or this on your master bus? Most cases they say yes. And I say, look, how about this? Can you try a print without this and that? Again, I'm not naming names right now, what it is, and then they give me a call an hour later and they're like, wow, mix sounds way better. Why is that? And then I explain them, what happened to, and it's surprisingly funny how we have all this technology in our hands and we have all this ability to work with music and manipulate it.
Yep.
We'll jump on certain things because we think we like it, but will overlook the whole musicality of it, just because we like the feel of what it did on, the curve that it did for us. And because they're into the mix all the time and working it, that they stop noticing it. And I can, and for me, I never heard it before, so I play it, and immediately I'm seeing that it's stuck somewhere. Then I try to undo it or try to add to it and see what works.
Yeah.
And it doesn't. And once they take it off, either one or two or three, the elements that they apply there, and I'm not talking about compression. That's totally fine. I'm all about, if you have bus compression and it sounds right, keep your bus compression. I don't have a problem with that.
Okay. Yep.
So there are other processes that can happen to just take the life out of it. And now some engineers, you'll tell them that, they'll be like, this is how I did it. If I take that off, I have to readjust. And I'll tell them, okay, if you want to readjust, great, do it. If you don't, okay, I'll work with it as is. I'll deal with it, And some of them will take it off and readjust, and it will work great. And some of them won't be interested because they're on another project, or, they just like how they're mixed. And I'm like, okay, I'll work with it as is. I know how it could be without it, because you start to learn that stamp that it does, or the signature of it. So, I think that, and again, the reason I'm not naming names is because there's a few different ones out there, but in the end of the day, you have to remember the master bus is the most sensitive part of the mix, because it takes everything.
Yep.
If you put these processes on instruments or groups, then they will have less effect on the whole song. They have the effect on the specific instruments or buses groups that you apply on.
Yeah, and if you go as heavy-handed on a processor on the master bus as you do on an individual channel, it's like putting 20 teaspoons of sugar where you only needed one on something else, or you know what I'm saying. It's like you have to be much lighter-handed if you're going to do it as a general principle, yeah.
But everybody makes differently, and or everybody has a way they like to work, like their friends, or when they look after and see and learn. But you have to remember that even if somebody does it, they probably if they're really good at it, they probably found a way how to make it work right. Just because somebody's using a certain thing and they're really successful at it and they sound great, doesn't mean you can apply the same thing and it will make it work the same. So, some engineers I get mixes from, and they apply that stuff, but it works for them. They know how to apply it in a way that you don't feel it's heavy-handed, or you don't feel that the musicality got flattened.
Okay. Yeah.
But there are people who, like, they saw and they learned, or they got tips and they start doing it. Either read online or somebody gave them a tip, try this, try that, and they did too much of it, and it just took the life out. And
that's
it's out there.
Yeah.
I'm sure if the cost of plugins was exactly as hardware gear, people wouldn't be putting as much plugins on their master bus.
Yeah, I think you're probably right about that.
But that being said, what I'm said applies to certain mixes that come in. It's not a rule of thumb. And if what you do sounds good with it and it works, it works. If it can work without it better, you can try and see. Sometimes it's worth auditioning, seeing how it's without, even if it needs adjustment. It might need a few tweaks, but it might sound better. But it's worth experimenting and seeing what works. I do that all the time with the gear. Like, I hook up different chains and I see which chain really sounds good to me, or just I like because it changes something. So I'm not just falling for, there's a change, I got to do that. No, maybe the change is not that great.
Yeah, I can see that's something that's going on that people need to rethink, is having a go-to chain, or having, I always process this in this way, that type of, instead of listening and hearing what's required. and that's an easy trap to fall into, I think, especially when people are starting out. They're excited about plugins, and and they're trying to learn. So someone else says, "Oh yeah, you use this, all these things," and then, but yeah, it needs to come back to listening in the end, I think.
Yeah. And you don't have to impose something. If it doesn't work with that, then you don't have to impose it. I'll try different scenarios, different chains, and see what works for me. And sometimes something that really sounds cool doesn't fit. It sounds cool, but it just ruins it. And then sometimes the opposite, something that sounds really not that great, actually is the perfect fit.
Yeah, right. And it's having the experience and the, I guess, conviction to know when that is, and rolling with it, I guess.
Yeah, it's a lot about integrity with yourself, because you can tell yourself you have a tone. You can tell yourself, this is what my clients like. You can tell yourself, this is the true way to do it. This is what I like. You can say all of that and it will work. But you can also ask yourself, does it really work? Or am I doing that because the last project the client liked? And I want to keep that consistency. I always ask myself what works, like if it does or not. I'm not just running through a certain piece of gear because the 4 projects before were all working with it great. I really try to listen to the music and see what fits and not put that imprint of something just because it worked before. There are certain things that work in general. Yes, there are. Especially, throughout your career, you experience certain things that work for you. Okay, there is, and it maybe becomes part of your signature sound. That can happen as well. But there's also a point where you can be more flexible to trying things and seeing, if you move that direction, does it help or not? There's certain things I will stay for a long time with that I love, and certain things I will change. But in general, the picture has to be what you can give to it and be honest with yourself. Does it sound better with that or not?